This is the fifth man she is sending away, and he owns two taxis. Not one, two.
Tony Dlamini stood at the gate of the Dubé homestead in his cleanest shirt, the blue one his sister had ironed twice that morning, holding a plastic bag of fruit because his mother told him women like a man who comes with something in his hands. He had rehearsed his speech in the mirror. He had even borrowed his cousin's cologne, the expensive one from Clicks that smelled like a department store and confidence. Naledi looked at him from the veranda, looked at the plastic bag, looked at his shoes, and without moving from her chair, called out to her younger sister inside the house. "Thandi, come and tell this man I am sleeping." It was 2 in the afternoon. Bongani stood there, fruit in hand, sun on his neck, and the dignity slowly leaving his body like air from a punctured tire. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the gate, looked back at the veranda, and then turned and walked away. Slowly. The way a man walks when he still has a little pride left, and does not want to lose the rest of it on someone else's driveway. The neighborhood women watching from behind their curtains shook their heads. Naledi was the first daughter of Isaac Dubé, a man so respected in his community that people straightened their backs when they heard his name. Isaac was not rich in the way that Johannesburg was teaching people to measure richness, with cars and sneakers and Instagram. He was rich in the old way, the way that meant something. He had land, he had livestock, he had a handshake that men trusted, and he had a wife, Grace, who held the home together so quietly and so completely that the house would have collapsed into dust without her, and everyone knew it except Isaac. Grace Dubé was the kind of woman who woke up before the sun, not because anyone asked her to, but because rest felt like something she had not yet earned. She cooked, she prayed, she buried her worries in the garden and grew tomatoes over them. She had 4 children, and she loved all of them, but Naledi, the firstborn, the one who came out screaming and never really stopped, Naledi was the one who sat in a special corner of her heart that sometimes kept her up at night. Because Naledi was beautiful in a way that caused problems. Not just pretty, not just well-dressed, but the kind of beautiful that made strangers forget what they were saying mid-sentence, the kind that made women check their husbands' faces in a crowded room. She had her father's cheekbones and her mother's eyes and a mouth that God had clearly spent extra time on, and she had known all of this since she was 14 years old, and that knowledge had done something to her that no amount of her mother's prayers had been able to undo. She believed she was owed something exceptional. Now Naledi at 22 was not simply beautiful and difficult. She was beautiful, difficult, and completely certain that she was right about everything, which is the most dangerous combination a person can carry into adulthood. She had finished school with decent marks, not because she studied hard, but because she was sharp in the way that some people are just born sharp, and she had never once had to work very hard for anything, because beauty in a township opens doors that qualifications are still standing in line for. She dressed like she was always on her way somewhere important, even on a Tuesday. Even when she was just walking to the spaza shop for bread, she wore her clothes like a statement and moved through the streets of Soweto like the streets had been laid specifically for her feet. Other girls her age were worrying about lobola negotiations and whether their boyfriends were faithful. Naledi was not worried about anything because she had decided, quietly and completely, that ordinary was not going to be her portion. The first suitor had been Sifo Nkosi, 26 years old, broad shoulders, the kind of laugh you could hear from 2 streets away. Sifo fixed minibus taxis with his hands and drove one on weekends, and he was saving money with the discipline of a man who could already see the life he was building, even if no one else could see it yet. He came to the Dubé home on a Saturday with his uncle, the way tradition required, and Isaac received them with respect and warmth, because Isaac was that kind of man. Naledi was called from inside the house. She came out, sat down, looked at Sifo once, and the expression on her face was the same expression a person makes when they open a gift and find socks inside. Polite. Disappointed. Already thinking about something else. Later in the kitchen, when her mother asked what she thought, Naledi was stirring porridge and did not even look up. "He smells like engine oil, Mama. I cannot smell engine oil for the rest of my life." Grace Dubé set down her cup carefully, the way she did when she was choosing between what she wanted to say and what she was allowed to say. "That engine oil," Grace said quietly, "is buying his mother a new roof." Naledi said nothing, kept stirring, and the matter was closed. The second one was Thabo Makona, a schoolteacher from Orlando East who wore spectacles and read novels and could hold a conversation about anything from politics to Portuguese football. He was not the tallest man, not the flashiest, But there was something steady about him. The kind of steady that a woman only learns to appreciate after she has been with someone unstable and lost 3 years of her sleep over it. He wrote Naledi a letter. An actual letter, on paper, with neat handwriting, because he was that kind of man. Naledi read it, folded it back up, and used it to fan herself on a hot afternoon. When her Aunt Zadwa asked what happened to the teacher, Naledi waved her hand like she was dismissing a slow waiter. A man who spends his days teaching children arithmetic cannot give me a life, Aunt Zadwa. I want a man who has already added up to something. Aunt Zadwa, who had been married for 31 years to a man who started with nothing and built something slowly and loved her loudly, looked at her niece for a long moment. Naledi, she said, in the tone that older women use when they are trying to plant a seed in soil that is not yet ready. The men you are throwing away, other women are picking up and watering. Naledi laughed, the kind of laugh that is pretty on the outside and hollow in the middle. Let them water, Auntie. I am waiting for a tree that is already grown. The third suitor came with a government job and medical aid. The fourth came with a house in Deep Kloof and no debt. And Naledi sent them both away with the same unbothered energy. She gave everything that did not match the picture she had built inside her head. Her mother stopped asking questions. Her father started going quiet at dinner in a way that said everything he refused to say out loud. And the village name had already stuck by now, Ntambai Yamazwe, the woman who belongs to no country, the woman no man is good enough for. And then Damien October walked into her life, and for the first time in 28 years, Naledi Dubé did not have a single sharp word ready. He was from Cape Town, which already made him interesting, because Cape Town men carried themselves differently, like the mountain behind their city had given them a particular kind of confidence that flat land could not produce. He was tall, he was light-skinned, he wore Italian suits the way other men wore t-shirts, comfortable and natural, and he drove a black Mercedes that he parked outside her workplace one Tuesday afternoon like he already knew she would look. She looked. He smiled, and that smile did something to her chest that she did not have a name for yet, but she would spend the next 5 years chasing it. Damien courted her the way a man courts a woman when he already knows he has her, and is simply enjoying the process. Roses delivered to her door on random Wednesdays, not Valentine's Day, random Wednesdays, because he said ordinary days deserved beautiful things. Hotel dinners in Santon where the menus had no prices because the kind of people who ate there did not need to ask. Weekends in Cape Town where he showed her the ocean at sunset, and she stood there feeling like she had finally arrived at the life she had always known she deserved. She gave him everything, her time, her loyalty, her softness, all the softness she had hidden from every other man who had tried to reach it. 5 years of her life, she poured into Damien October like water into good soil, certain that something permanent was growing. She was 33 now, and the conversations about marriage had become a comfortable rhythm between them. Nothing official, nothing rushed, but present, like a song playing in another room that you always knew was there. And then one Friday evening in November, she went to Emperor's Palace to surprise him, because his favorite restaurant was there, and she had made a reservation and bought a new dress, the red one that cost more than her electricity bill, because something in her chest that evening felt like a conclusion, felt like finally, felt like this is the night the waiting ends. She walked in, she scanned the restaurant, and she found him. He was at a corner table, the good one by the window, and there was a woman across from him, a woman in a white dress, and Damien was leaning forward the way he used to lean forward with Naledi in the beginning, like the person across from him was the only person in the room. Naledi stood at the entrance of that restaurant in her red dress, with her reservation in her bag, and her whole future dissolving in front of her, and she watched Damien reach across the table and straighten the wedding ring on the woman's finger. His wife's finger. He had been married the entire time.
Enjoying the story, right? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting stories. Now let's get back to the story.
In the restaurant. That was the thing people never knew, because nobody was there to see it. Nobody except the waiter, who pretended to be very busy with the menu stand near the door, and the couple at table 7, who had gone very quiet the moment the atmosphere changed. Naledi stood at the entrance of that restaurant in her green dress, the one she had bought 3 weeks ago specifically for this night, and she looked at Damien across the room, and Damien looked back at her, and the woman beside him turned to see what he was looking at. Naledi smiled. Not because she was okay, but because she had been raised by Grace Dubé, and Grace Dubé had taught her daughters that you do not hand your worst moments to people who do not deserve to hold them. So she smiled, The way a queen smiles when someone has made a terrible mistake in her presence, turned around slowly on her heels, walked back through the door, got into her car, and drove 4 blocks before she pulled over on a dark street in Johannesburg and put her forehead on the steering wheel. And then Naledi Dubé, who had not cried since she was 9 years old and lost her favorite dress in a fire, cried so hard her whole body shook, cried the way people cry when it is not just tonight they are crying about, but every night they chose this man over sleep, every dinner they cooked and kept warm, every time they pushed away a warning thought because loving him felt better than being right. She cried for 5 years in one sitting. She drove home, washed her face, and by morning she had made a decision. She was done. Not just with Damien, not just with men who lied, but with the whole project, the hope, the waiting by the phone, the wondering, the soft and stupid vulnerability of wanting someone. She packed everything Damien had ever given her into a box with the focused energy of a woman rewiring herself from the inside, and she put the box outside her door, and she called nobody, and she explained nothing. And when her sister Thandi called that afternoon because she had heard something through the family telephone line that is every African family, Naledi answered and said simply, "I am fine, Thandi. I have just decided to stop wasting time." Thandi was quiet for a moment on the other end. "Nayli, being hurt is not wasting time. Being hurt means you tried something." "Well," Naledi said, examining her nails, her voice smooth and completely terrifying in its calmness, "I am done trying." She hung up, made herself tea, and sat by the window of her Johannesburg flat. 33 years old, stunning in her morning wrapper, absolutely certain that she had just made the strongest decision of her life. She had actually just made the most expensive one. At 35 she was still turning men away, but the reasons had quietly changed, the way a story changes when the person telling it does not want to admit what really happened. It was no longer about standards, though she would never say that out loud. It was about protection now, about never again being the woman on the dark street with her forehead on a steering wheel. A good man named Lethawi asked her to dinner, and she said she was busy, for 3 weeks straight, until he stopped asking. A kind and funny man named Ree Philo made her laugh harder than she had laughed in years, and she went home that same night and talked herself out of him by morning, listing reasons the way someone lists reasons not to buy something they actually want. Too available, she decided. Men who are too available want too much in return. Thandi, who had by now married a perfectly imperfect man named Spoo, and was pregnant with their first child, listened to this theory on the phone and said nothing for so long that Naledi asked if she was still there. "I am here," Thandi said. "I am just trying to decide if I should say what I am thinking." "Since when do you hold back?" "Since I realized," Thandi said gently, "that you have an answer for everything, and none of the answers are making you happy." At 40, the mirror began telling her things she did not ask to hear. Not ugly things, nothing so dramatic, just quiet things, the way time whispers before it starts to speak normally. A softness at the jaw, a tiredness around the eyes that sleep was no longer fully fixing. She was still beautiful, genuinely, the kind of woman who walked into a room and registered, but the room no longer stopped the way it used to, and she noticed, and the noticing sat inside her chest like a small stone she carried everywhere. The suitors had thinned out the way harmattan thins out a garden, gradually, and then all at once, and then you look up one day and wonder when everything got so quiet. So she poured herself into work, because work, unlike men, gave back exactly what you put in. She had always been good with her hands, precise and creative in the way her mother was, and she opened a small seamstress shop in Pretoria with money she had saved and a reputation she had built stitch by stitch. The shop grew. Her name grew with it. Women came from other neighborhoods with photographs torn from magazines, and Naledi looked at the photographs, and then looked at the women, and then made them something better than what they had pointed at, because she had an eye for what a woman needed, even when the woman herself did not fully know. The shop became her companion, her purpose, the thing that got her out of bed on the mornings when the silence of her flat felt particularly loud. She was good at it, and being good at something is its own kind of comfort, even when it is the only comfort in the room. She was 52 when she saw Saifo. She almost did not recognize him, not because he had changed badly, but because he had changed well, and people who grow well sometimes look like entirely different people from who they were when they were still becoming themselves. He was broader now, settled into his body the way men settle when they have stopped trying to impress anyone, and he was wearing a simple shirt and laughing at something his wife was saying, a laugh that came from low in his chest, the kind that is not performed for anyone. His wife was not what Nality had expected, and she was ashamed later that she had expected anything at all. She was an ordinary-looking woman with an extraordinary face, the kind of face that is not immediately beautiful, but becomes more beautiful the longer you look at it, because what is on the inside has arranged itself on the outside over time. She was holding the hand of their youngest child, a little girl in a yellow dress, and two teenage boys were walking ahead of them arguing about something, and a daughter was on Sipho's other side showing him something on her phone. For children. A whole, loud, messy, laughing life. Sipho looked up and saw her, and Nality braced herself, because she had earned bitterness from this man, had laughed him out of her father's yard, and sent him away with his engine oil and his hope, and she would have understood anger, would almost have preferred it to what he actually did. He smiled warmly, without performance, the way people smile when they have long since made peace with something. Nality, it is good to see you, you look well. That was it. No sharpness, no pointed look at her left hand, no satisfaction in his eyes, nothing except the plain and simple kindness of a man who had moved so far forward that looking back cost him nothing. She watched him walk away with his family, the little girl in the yellow dress now riding on his back, laughing at the ceiling of the mall, and something broke open in Nalita's chest quietly and completely. The way a dam does not always collapse loudly. Sometimes the wall just develops a crack, and the water finds it, and everything held back for years begins slowly to come through. She stood in that mall for a long time after they were gone. Then she went to her car, sat down, and did not cry because she had forgotten how, and that was perhaps the saddest thing of all. At 75, she was still dressing like she was waiting for someone. That was what the neighbors noticed first, not with cruelty, at least not all of them, but with the particular sadness of watching a person still standing at a bus stop for a bus that has long since changed its route. The short skirts, the heels she could no longer fully manage, the bright colors that a younger Nality had worn with authority and an older Nality wore like a question she was still asking. She had money, her shop had seen to that, she was comfortable in the way that is supposed to feel like enough, and some days it did feel like enough, and those were the good days. On the other days she walked. The streets of Soweto had changed around her and stayed the same under her feet, and she walked them the way she had walked them at 22, with her chin up, though the chin was held up by pride now rather than certainty, and there is a difference, a significant one, that the body understands even when the mind refuses to. Young people looked at her and looked away, not unkindly, but in the helpless way that youth looks at age when it does not yet understand that the distance between them is not as wide as it appears. She found herself at the acacia tree on a Thursday afternoon, not because she had planned to, but because feet remember things the mind lets go of, and her feet had been walking to that tree since she was a child. It was older now, broader, its roots more visible above the ground, the way old things tend to stop hiding what holds them up. She sat down beneath it slowly, the way her body now required, and the afternoon light came through the leaves and moved on the ground around her, and she sat with it, and did not perform anything for anyone, because there was no one there to perform for. She heard her father's voice then, not as a ghost, not as anything dramatic, just the way the voices of the people who shaped us live somewhere behind our own thoughts, available when we are finally quiet enough to hear them. A woman who chases the perfect moon, Isaac Dubé had told her once, sitting under this same tree when she was 16 and already beginning to be difficult, will miss every sunrise. She had laughed at him then, the way she laughed at everyone who tried to reach her. She was not laughing now. She sat under the acacia tree in her bright clothes, a 75-year-old woman who had been beautiful and proud and certain, who had built a business and a reputation and a very clean, very quiet life, and she understood finally, not with bitterness, but with the exhausted clarity of someone who has walked a very long road to arrive at something they could have known much earlier, that she had spent 50 years guarding her heart so carefully that nothing had been allowed to grow inside it. She had kept it safe. She had kept it empty. And so let the record show this, not as a judgment, because she was not a villain. She was a woman who was afraid and called it standards, who was wounded and called it wisdom, who was waiting and called it patience, but she was waiting for the wrong thing, in the wrong direction, with her back to every ordinary and magnificent sunrise that kept coming anyway, whether she turned around for it or not. She did not die alone because no man loved her. She died alone because she never loved anyone enough to let them be human. The end.